I think something that people need to know is that you surround yourself by so many different people, right, as you're coming up, but you're going to have to reach up. Like my mom, for example, or my father, they mentored me, but up to a certain point. They couldn't mentor me to be in the position I'm in now. That's not...
No, it's not arrogant. It's just...
No.
There's sometimes limits. And as you have more experience and like a subject matter expertise or whatever it could be, they might not have that in their arsenal, their DNA. So we have to continue evolving that in our communities.
And mentorship is so important. You know, I remember about 10 years ago, I started to do that kind of thing again. I was reaching up. I was like, all right, I think I've hit a moment here or hit a point here where I'm like, this is it. I need to kind of start looking outside of the box. And one of my mentors told me this. He goes, look, you know, I think sometimes instead of thinking that you need to learn something new, you might just need to unlearn something. And that's something that's a very good concept, you know, for people to think about it. You know, we're raised by our parents, our siblings, or whatever. And, you know, we come up and we learn all these things. And some of them don't serve us anymore. They just don't, you know.
You have to be okay with that and not feel bad about it.
No, you know, and at first, you know, I would feel kind of bad about it because I'd be in that loop. I'd be like, well, you know, so-and-so taught me this and this, but it's like, okay, it's not working for you. You got to learn something different. You got to unlearn that. Yeah. You got to get rid of that. Some of them can be habits. Some things are like bad habits. You got to get rid of them. They're not shaping. That's what SHIFT stands for, by the way. SHIFT, SHFT, shaping, habits, form, transformation. That's cool. Really that's the concept. It's like if you can hone in on those habits that will create shape in you, they will form transformation. And it's so true. It is so true. But I couldn't get to that point unless I was starting to reach out and to reach up and to really try to figure out, you know, who can help me in those situations.
I love that. Hello and welcome to Pathways. I am your host, Amber Stitt. And today we have Fabian Serrano with us, the founder of SHFT Insurance. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Amber. I appreciate that.
Thanks for being another insurance nerd, caring about risk management.
Right.
It's not always the glamorous job, right?
No, it's not. Super boring.
It's not boring. You're an innovator in technology, you say.
That's right. Yeah. Try to keep it fun.
So we met through a community. There's a 10X community out there. And so we were doing our own learning, innovating ourselves. And so that's how we met. So I'm glad that we were able to connect that way. Community is a big thing. And I know that's important to you. I do want to talk about your story, your origin story, how you got into insurance planning, because I think it's more than just helping people buy insurance. And was this always something that you thought you'd be in commercial insurance and beyond?
No. I knew I'd be solving problems.
Yeah.
Because that's what insurance is about, commercial insurance specifically. And so I knew that for sure. I just didn't know I'd be in insurance. It's just one of those fields that you're just like, insurance, really? Seems kind of like boring. And I'm not a boring person in personal life.
Nope.
Yeah, maybe I can be, but I like to keep things exciting and things like that. And so insurance just is kind of like one of those things where it's just almost not really symbiotic with the character that I have. But yeah, it's crazy.
I think that's important because it can be daunting. In my world, I talk about disability and death. Would you like to insure against that? Commercial might be a little bit easier, but I know people can sometimes try to skip steps with that. And it's all so important. And we'll talk about that more. But you also talk about innovating and staying on top of things. And so I think you're similar to me where we want to keep innovating and providing the most efficient meetings as possible. And I think some of that has to come with our personalities. We might just be more, let's get things done, more of an attitude.
Yeah.
Versus let's just kind of fluff it out and talk about it. We want people to take action. So I know that's where part of our bond comes from. Now, did you grow up thinking, I'll be an entrepreneur, I'll sell insurance? How did this even become a thing?
I want to say yes. You know, growing up, I saw my dad own a business. He ran a furniture business and he was involved in it, you know, for a large period of its growth. And I remember seeing him just, you know, opening up the warehouse, turning all the machines, having his conversations with his employees, and then just getting to work. As I got older, that was the thing that I really enjoyed seeing was, you know, someone from the top, you know, sending the message down, giving that inspiration, having those conversations, giving the direction, but then also getting involved in the legwork. You know, I think a lot of us have kind of started trying to steer away from it. You know, there's a lot of talk out there where if you're the one doing the work, then, you know, you're really not running a business. And I get some of that. Of course, you want to scale and you want an enterprise that isn't just you, but, you know, you also have to lead from the front. You know what I mean? And so I saw a lot of that. And starting off in the workforce, so to speak, insurance was the first thing I jumped into. And so I tried to kind of embody a lot of that in the agency that I worked for, but it was very difficult to do that because in that agency, there were just a lot of, this is the way we do it. Don't deviate from it.
Is that word I use?
Yeah. And so it was a little challenging, but, as the years progressed, I kind of figured out my way, figured out where I fit in. And I just started to kind of double down on some of those skills that I had already, learned and developed as I was coming up.
When you're talking about seeing your father in action, you can't scale everything away. Got to show up and lead. And I think a lot of your teams need to see you and see that you care, that you're not just, I call it on the show, and I'll say this in consulting meetings, when the leader just floats up like a balloon, a red balloon up into the sky with a visionary, that's their role, but you got to come and still participate.
Yeah.
Part of also though, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off, but I also think the consumer, the customer needs to see that too.
Yeah.
I think it's so important for your client, your prospects, the people out there whom you would like to do business with. They have to see that too. I mean, it's okay. I get it. I see certain people I know work hard and then I see them loafing. At that point, I'm like, hey man, they deserve it. Right on. But if all I see is just partying or loafing around, and I'm just like, okay.
Disconnected.
People want to see hard work. They really do. They might comment otherwise, but the reality is you really want to see that, and I think the prospects want to see it. So that's also important for them to see too.
I just had this visual. You think of a restaurant, you go into the restaurant, and the ones that have been around for a long time, you see the owner. Mm-hmm. They're walking the room. Mm-hmm. How's your dinner? It's almost like take that into the corporate world or in a private setting or whatever it could be. That's probably that element of that community. I know that a lot of the episodes I've had this year, I've met a lot of people all over the globe, and there's this community vibe where there's ultimate happiness with being able to be connected. And I think that's probably like that visual coming out of just some of those interviews I've had, you're equating it to that. And I think that's why it's probably necessary for the leaders to be around from a branding perspective too. The consumer, the client wants to see that.
100%.
Yeah.
You're in the people business.
Seeing success.
I mean, people say that all the time, but it's so true. You're in the people business. You need to relate to people. People need to see you. They need to know who you are. It's 1000% true.
On my show, because of my community of colleagues, we talk a lot about next generation. There's a lot of focus on some of the younger people coming into my industry or yours, financial services. There is this disruptor talk. There's these buzzwords we have. Mm-hmm. Now, do you think that you were seeing some of the old processes and systems, and that's why you have become passionate about innovating and modernizing the industry? Is that kind of where it came from, was the experience on the job? We hear about it a lot. We want to pull more people in because they're growing up in a different world than 20 years older than them. But is that where it started, or we have to make some changes here?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Our industry is really based on old concepts, old philosophies, and some of them still work to this day, but most of them are really becoming outdated, and that's part of shift. That's the concept there. What's even crazier is this. I was talking to someone about this in our industry recently. This is so true. The old way was a brick and mortar office, right? You fill it up with agents. You pay for a lot of advertisement. Phones ring. Everybody answers. Everybody makes money. Cool, whatever. And then there's this, this guy or gal at the top, and, they're making overrides or whatever. With social media where it's at today, right? With technology streamlining everything that we do, right? So there's no more paperwork. There's no more filling out. One agent, one person can kind of do all of that. And you don't need a brick and mortar office. You can literally be in Tennessee tonight. You can be in California next week. You can travel to Hawaii with your family, all while writing business. That's not normal. To me, that's
success. That is the success. Freedom of whatever that is for you.
That is. And so to answer your question, that's a lot of the inspiration. That's really where shift in that concept comes into play, because, you see a lot of these old ways, and a lot of people in our industry are still stuck in that. This is the way we do it. And it's like, no. It's not the way you do it.
I think you and I are in this realm of it's more important to have more behind the scenes, maybe that you're not showing off, like that big office, the luxury. I mean, sometimes people that truly want to be face to face, that's where they get their flow. Sure, there might need to be a space for that, but success used to be that fancy office, all this staff, and then like you said, that person up at the top. Now we've kind of figured out a way to, how do we get the most tax efficient as possible, scale where it needs to scale, but then have the more opportunities for your family and your friends.
Yeah, 100%.
And you don't have to show it to the world to then get that pat on the back. Like you're giving yourself that validation because you've done the work, but you don't have to show it off in a sense. And we even follow Grant Cardone and some of the things and the wild things he talks about, but he's very much, you might think I'm flashy, but everything he does is to have a tax advantage opportunity while participating with family and friends and bringing the business along for the ride and making it symbiotic, but he's getting to do multiple things with it. It's more like the velocity of money. How do we make this $1 work for us multiple ways? And we control that narrative.
Right. 100%. Funny because Grant talks about why he does some of that stuff. And, one of the reasons he says he does that is for his competitors. He wants them to see what he's up to.
Free advertising.
Yeah, which I completely get. But yeah, no, to your point, I think for me, the biggest flex is being able to take your family where you want, to still conduct business from wherever you're at and to run the day to day that way. I think that to me is a huge flex. Recently we took off to El Salvador. I was on the phone with a prospect. We wrote a deal, went to Lake Tahoe, same thing. And it's like, I'm traveling. I'm taking my family out. We're doing things. We're staying busy. We're staying active. I'm staying active. I'm able to go to the gym and do all these other things. And at the same time, I'm not missing a beat. I will say this, that is not for everybody though. Some people can't do that. And that's okay too. But that's really not the audience that I would be speaking to, if I'm being honest with you. But yeah, I love where you're going with that.
And that's where I think part of that shift podcast that you have started is the shift in the mindset. But it's ultimately up to you to decide what you want that to be.
Yeah, 100%.
So I know that's something new. So congratulations on that, because I knew you before and now after the launch. Yeah.
Yep.
What's your end goal? Insurance or more? What are you going to do with that?
So the Shift podcast is the name of the podcast. And really what I wanted to emphasize on, Amber, is just mindset. You know what I mean? There's so many people on this planet. All of us have something to learn. Right. And I think that when we've learned the thing we need to learn, I think now we're most qualified to teach the thing, right? Whatever it is. And so for me, that podcast, I just want it to be a collaboration of people who've learned the thing that they needed to learn and then who want to share it. That's it. Whether it be a business owner, a teacher, or whoever, it doesn't matter. I want to have an ecosystem with the podcast that it's not so much business related. It's more of a mindset. You know what I mean? Because that's what Shift is all about. It's all a mindset. For me, Shift is that's my agency name, SHFT Insurance. It's really selfish. I'll be honest with you. It's a selfish name. It's a selfish agency because it has everything to do with me. It embodies who I am and what I stand for and what I've experienced and everything I've accumulated over the years in this industry and in life in general.
So let's talk a little bit about risk management. Boo-hoo, that sounds really boring. But no, it can be exciting to take control of protecting yourself with less stress. And part of insurance products and planning can help you with that. But I think it goes even a conversation before that. So you talked about getting into the business, you got into insurance. But when you move into the protection mode, if you start things in advance and really look at what do I want ultimately, like what's the flex for you? But plugging in the safety nets, that allows us to have more opportunities to travel and do different things and have that less stress in our lives. And that's why Pathways of Peak Performance with my podcast is really to find ways to introduce to my audience people that can help fill in the gaps so that we just have more well-rounded, just better days on a day-to-day, because life does happen. Things can happen. So with you going into commercial insurance, it can be one of those topics that people can shut down a bit and they don't want to think about the bad things or what can happen or to pay for products, and they just kind of shut down there. Are there any ways that you've instilled, or are there any, stories behind your message of why you are helping people with their insurance planning? Is there any lessons learned where this is really where you become a big advocate to help people protect their lives and their businesses?
Yeah. Recently when I went to El Salvador, we went to go look at and see where my mom grew up. Right. And so, we're traveling around and I'm talking to my mom and, I'm asking her questions about, little things and where she came up and her story. And everyone has a story, right? Everyone has these things that have inspired them either to leave their country and start a family elsewhere. That's a hard thing. Think about that. My mom was, I think, 20 years old, 1,400
without resources
miles.
like we have.
Yeah. And so she needed to leave, right? Because that was going to put her and then the next generation in position to win. And so I tell you this because everyone has a story. Everyone has a reason for why they started a business. Everyone has history. And so, one of the things that I do is when I'm working with a prospect or somebody that is interested, first thing I really need to know is like, am I able to solve your problem? But one thing I also do is I get to know that individual. Like I want to know them, on a personal level. Like, what's your story? What drives you? What's your motivator? Is it family? Is it money? Are you taking care of your grandmother? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And so I get involved with that. And then so through that, I'm able to kind of understand what's their motivator, right? And then I make the segue into things because now I've made them more relatable to them and their story. So I have so many different stories about that kind of a thing, but that's really what I try to do. We're definitely going to talk risk management. We're definitely going to talk about the things that you can do to really protect yourself and all that stuff. But none of that really hits or sticks if I'm not relating it to like, hey, why are you even in business? Like, why? Like, what's the point?
Well, I'm hearing you customize. And I think there's a lot of bad actors in our industry that try to hit high volume in a way that they're just going to go, okay, yep, you need umbrella. Yep, you need this. Yeah. But there's a way to build off of that. And some of the strategic partners I have now do walk people through. They don't sell homeowners insurance, but they will say, here's why you need XYZ limits. And they go, I literally have never been told this before. They just know they have to get it or they have to get the auto insurance, but they don't know the why behind the levels.
Yeah.
And we just allow it to happen and just say, I don't really understand it. So yes, just tell me what I need. So I like how you customize the box of necessary tools versus just a checklist of items.
The point you're making with coverages and things like that, it is wild to me how many people out there are still just not educated on the different levels of coverages that one needs and what you currently have. And it's wild to me. It's like, what it tells me is that there aren't enough agents out there really, taking the time to educate. I'm not trying to put anybody out there, but it's the truth. I mean, it's evident. It's an indicator. That's what that is. It's an indicator that we're not taking the time. Instead, what we're doing is we're order takers.
Yeah.
Oh, this is what you have. Okay, here, let me compete. And it's like, that's not doing them a service. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I suppose it's partly the consumer's fault too. I don't know when this began a thing, but we've talked about antiquated processes, but we kind of nod our heads to, yes, we need these things. We need to invest in these places. We've been told this savings account, whatever terms we've grown up with doesn't necessarily mean you need to stop paying attention to what's happening around you. And I get it. You're not always going to have the bandwidth to learn all the products. As a consumer, you got things to do. That's what you're hoping your advisor, your agent is for. But I think as a society, stopping for a moment to participate in your own lives, let's start there.
That's a power move. Yep.
I mean, and I get it. We're busy.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of distractions too. So working with teams that can help you educate you. And as life changes, you can update and add on. So let's talk about how have you built your team to lead these people? Like, how did your company help others with this process?
The way we run our organization is we use a lot of back-end support. So there's technology, and then we have VAs that really help us with all the mundane stuff, right? So what that gives me an opportunity and the team an opportunity to do is to talk and to really start building those connections with our prospects and our clients. It's through that communication where we're really going to find out what the problems are, what the issues that organization may have. And then we just get to work and we just get to solving, the problem. And I'll be honest with you, I have turned down more people. To me, it's not considered bragging, but I have turned down more people than I've actually done business with. And there's a lot of reasons for it.
But is it because they might not want to participate in the work? Of the conversation.
Yeah. Some of it has to do with, the stages that they're at. It's interesting, but when you're starting a business, the mindset's very different from when you're,
money.
Well, yeah, so you want to cut corners and you want to really keep the pencil sharp in certain areas. And I get it. It's completely understandable. I get it. I understand it. But, when you have an enterprise and you're generating several millions of dollars a year, you think a little different. Now you're like, wait, okay, so how do I protect that business, right? And then that's really where I come into play. It's that when you're making that shift from, all right, real small business running and gunning to now like, okay, we have something here of value. How do I protect it? Well, then that's where we come in and that's where we can help that organization out, and then sometimes we can't maybe it has nothing to do with the owner's mindset or maybe it just has to do with, hey, look, you don't really have an issue here that I see we need to fix. At this point, it would just be, me. You want to work with me. That's fine too. But we do that. I do that from time to time. You said something earlier. You said something about, volume. I'm a numbers guy, 10X, right? All that cool stuff. But I've done the volume.
Well, I have high volume. I have multiple meetings a day.
Yeah.
It's like a physician's office technically with my day because of sitting at a desk and we're digital. We can do that.
Yeah.
So it's still nothing wrong with volume of efficiency in our meetings, educating people efficiently.
Right. Yeah. You can scale that. But, for me, I don't want to deal with a lot of customers. I want to deal with a smaller group, a smaller crowd, a more specific group of clients.
It reminds me of a time when I was an employee of my brother's firm and he brought in Dan, I forget his last name, but he owned a couple different companies and he then traveled at the time and he would say how to get referrals. And we hired this person to speak to us about referrals. And it sounds very salesy and pitchy, but you want to work with people that you enjoy working with. And as you cultivate that, there's going to be this love of what you do. Mm-hmm. It's just like a spouse or a partner. You want to have some core values and similarities there.
Right.
So there could be transactional work. I do a lot of transactional work. Insurance planning is my main thing, disability and life insurance. But you want to have amazing conversations while you can with people from all over and enjoy that. And so if there's just not alignment there, I think it's okay to say that personality doesn't work. Just like choosing your own physician, your provider doesn't work. Go find another one. That's okay too.
Right.
But having that open-mindedness to say, okay, what do I want this to look like? But then you can really hone in over time. Was it always like that for you? Or was there a period at the starting point? Because I think we all kind of go through that. This is great, but now we can really choose once we've done some of the work in our business. It's not always like right away.
It's like what we were talking about previously, everyone has something to learn. And when you've learned it, you're now qualified to share it. Yeah. So I can say that with 1000% confidence because I've been the volume guy. I've been the guy who just took on as much business as he could. And it doesn't work in the long term. You mentioned something right now about, it's comparable to picking the right partner. How true is that? You pick the wrong partner, you're not going to have a happy life. You're just not.
And you can't change people.
No.
You can understand them better, but we can't change our spouse or partner. Nope.
You pick the wrong clients, you're going to have a miserable experience, and so that matters. It is important, and I believe that there's a business out there that can serve just about every type of client, and so to that point, I'm like, I know somebody will handle it and take care of it. I'm just not the guy for it.
On that note, moving into more of the leadership route, I know that you and I would assume, believe that having people mentor us is important. And then having the mentorship. Is there anything that's really been insightful within the last 12 months for you that's just kind of changed it all for you? You want to share?
Well, as it pertains to mentorship, I think something that people need to know is that you surround yourself by so many different people, right, as you're coming up, but you're going to have to reach up. Like my mom, for example, or my father, they mentored me, but up to a certain point. They couldn't mentor me to be in the position I'm in now. That's not...
No, it's not arrogant. It's just...
No.
There's sometimes limits. And as you have more experience in like a subject matter expertise or whatever it could be, they might not have that in their arsenal, their DNA. So we have to continue evolving that in our communities.
And mentorship's so important. I remember about 10 years ago, I started to do that kind of thing again. I was reaching up. I was like, all right, I think I've hit a moment here or hit a point here where I'm like, this is it. I need to kind of start looking outside of the box. And one of my mentors told me this. He goes, look, I think sometimes instead of thinking that you need to learn something new, you might just need to unlearn something. And that's something that's a very good concept, for people to think about it. We're raised by our parents, our siblings, or whatever. And, we come up and we learn all these things. And some of them don't serve us anymore. They just don't, You
have to be okay with that and not feel bad about it.
No, and at first, I would feel kind of bad about it because I'd be in that loop. I'd be like, well, so-and-so taught me this and this, but it's like, okay, it's not working for you. You got to learn something different. You got to unlearn that. Yeah. You got to get rid of that. Some of them can be habits. Some things are like bad habits. You got to get rid of them. They're not shaping. That's what SHIFT stands for, by the way. SHIFT, SHFT, shaping, habits, form, transformation. That's cool. Really that's the concept. It's like if you can hone in on those habits that will create shape in you, they will form transformation. And it's so true. It is so true. But I couldn't get to that point unless I was starting to reach out and to reach up and to really try to figure out, who can help me in those situations.
I love that. What are your favorite books right now?
Oh man. So I even gifted these books to my brother. So Think and Grow Rich. I love it. I read that one in literally one session. And it's funny because that book really doesn't talk so much. I mean, it talks about money, but there's a concept there. It's like a mindset concept that I really loved about that book. The Power of One More by Ed Milet. That is an incredible book. Incredible book. I mean, that book probably almost got me to tears about 2 or 3 times. He shares so many different concepts in there, but The Power of One More is, I'll be honest with you, I want to credit Ed Milet in his book for the experience I had with my father.
You want to talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. With my dad, it was literally that one more, like if I had not made that one phone call,
right,
it would have been a completely different experience, you know? And because of that concept, you know what? Just make the phone call. You know, I've called him before. I've called my dad before. He never answers and this, that, and that, but I did it anyway. You know what I mean? From that came a gift, Amber. It was a gift. I called my dad, and from that conversation, he shared insights with me I'd never heard him share. And I got to hear his piece. I got to preserve his piece, you know, because I recorded that conversation. That's so crazy. And it was all because I just decided to do it one more time. And that's the power of it, you know? And so I love that book. That book, I'd recommend that to anybody. I'd recommend you get the audiobook and the book, you know what I mean? So you can just really digest it and just really eat it up. What other books? There's some others out there.
I think like Atomic Habits I could listen to, and it's like, yes again. So I think that this book sounds like it's one of those.
Yeah.
And you know, in your workday, there's a little tug that says you should go do this. And you're like, I don't want to do that right now. Like that hard conversation.
Yeah.
I know there's books about doing certain things at certain times of the day. It can get things over with, whatever. But when there's that little intuition, that little tug, and it could be a business idea too, give yourself some quiet time and some grace there. I think we're always moving so fast that sometimes some of the real answers are just within, but we're not listening because sometimes we just have to feel it too. And we're not ready to feel some of that emotion.
I love that. It's so true, Amber.
But if he hasn't answered and you wouldn't have made the call, then you would have had a different outcome last year.
Yeah. 100%. I heard this a while ago, you know, taking a step back is a power move. And it's so true. When you put pause, you just press pause for a little. We're not saying stop. We're not saying let all ambitions out the window. We're just saying pause. Just stop for a second. Assess what's really important. It's a power move. It is a huge power move because it gives you clarity on what you really want to focus on versus what doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Public speakers say pausing on stage, power move. Active listening, sometimes just say nothing and just wait.
Yeah.
So I feel like that pause, because of like the dopamine hits that we get with all of our social media, I think we feel like we have to answer. I think you are young enough to be where you have the cordless phone or the wall phone with the cord.
Yeah.
The phone would ring. We would go maybe to rush to go get it, but we didn't always get it. We could let it ring. Now we don't allow ourselves to not hear the ding and respond to the text. We don't have to respond in 30 seconds. So if you can pause and kind of put it on hold for a moment, showing some patience there. I know I make some of the better moves, whether it's writing something out, a negotiation of sorts. Sometimes if you just pause and give yourself some space from it, you come back with better answers and better delivery on your communication.
100%. 100%. I agree with you on that.
So before we wrap up today, any takeaways? I mean, you already have a few. Unlearning. We talked about pausing and some of the things that have helped you along your way from a leadership perspective. What could you give someone little action item to take on today to show more leadership within maybe themselves or their business?
I would probably say, get out of your own way. You know what I mean? Really get out of your own way. That's a hard pill to swallow sometimes for some of us. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, if I really wanted to share something to someone in leadership, it would just be lead by example. You know what I mean? But try to learn as much as you can. So many of us think we figured it out, you know, and I'm proof that we always have something to learn. Sometimes that's the differentiator. It's just taking the time to just scale up and just learn something new. You know, for me, it's
investing in yourself. And
I think that's probably the best investment one can make. We didn't talk too much about money, but money is a tool. Look, you don't take any of this with you. Nothing that we accumulate, you take with you. So don't have a fear of losing it. You know, have a fear of not using it.
I like that.
And so use the money that you have access to as a tool. Don't be dumb with it, but use it as a tool. Use it to increase your skills.
Yeah.
For me, that was probably one of the biggest game changers is I started investing more in myself, whether it was buying a $5 book to read the $1 Million Line, whether it was going to that, seminar. Sometimes I would go to a seminar and I wouldn't even learn anything from the seminar. I would meet somebody. In fact, that's kind of how you and I met. We both participated in a program, which, is a great program. You learn a lot too there, but it's the people that you're going to be in proximity with.
Yeah.
And so that's super important. That's another thing. Proximity is huge.
Yeah.
You put yourself in the same spaces as others who are thinking like you, who are reaching up and, looking forward. And so the other thing too would be to just, set yourself some goals and then continue to add to those. And if you set the right goals, and they're big enough, they'll pull you into the future. Does that make sense? They'll pull you into the future. Yeah. It's kind of like a vacation. When you have a vacation scheduled for February, you're like, okay, I got to go to the gym. I got to look this way. I got to be, I got to go buy this. I got to buy that because I have this thing going on in February. I know that sounds funny, but it's true. Something's pulling you into the future, and I really do believe that some of these successful people we hear about that live so long, it's because they always had things. They had a vision that was just pulling them into the future. They couldn't die.
That, what you just said, kind of pulling that forward, make sure you're not hanging around people that will just pull it back, pull you back. And sometimes it's hard.
It is.
But I think when you let that work within protecting yourself and your immediate people that are important to you and pushing towards those goals, that's where the X factor can come from. I know you've seen it. I've 100%. Seen it too. Once you invest the time and the money and let things happen. So thanks for sharing the shift mindset with everybody today.
Yeah, you're
and sharing
welcome.
your stories.
Absolutely. Yep. Courage over comfort. Courage over comfort.
All right. More to come. We'll see you soon.
Right on. Sounds good. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Pathways. For more information about the podcast, books, articles, the blog, and so much more, please visit my website at amberstitt.com. And remember, let's take action today. Thank you for listening.